Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor Jon V. Kofas is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
The state of Israel struck Qatar on September 9th, today is September 10th, to kill Hamas leadership, which was in Qatar to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza. It has been a pattern on the part of the state of Israel, part of its policy to, in fact, assassinate opposition, that is, leaders of Arab leaders as well as Palestinians, especially Palestinians, historically. And this is no different. So this is part of a pattern. Assassinating such leaders is part of a pattern. What is really unusual about striking Qatar is, first of all, Qatar is one of the closest allies of the United States in the Persian Gulf. Second, Qatar really has been acting as a mediator in order to achieve peace and ceasefire. Third, the Hamas leadership that was there in order to achieve an understanding about the terms of a peace settlement, a ceasefire settlement. The next issue, of course, is that the hitting Qatar on September 9th came on the heels of Israel having assassinated a number of leaders in Yemen, and Yemen responding with drone strikes. This is, in other words, part of a pattern, and this is just the latest. Now, putting this into perspective, the fact is that all indications are that Israel does not want ceasefire, and it has proved this. This is not just about this particular strike. Like I said, we have to put this into perspective. The broader perspective is that this is part of a pattern, assassinating the negotiators who are trying to put an end to the genocide in Gaza and to bring about a settlement on the broader issue called the Palestinian question, of course, historically. Now, obviously, the government of Qatar immediately condemned this as a violation of the sovereignty of that nation state. Other governments also came out and formally, in rhetoric, of course, made pronouncements such as that as well, that we condemn, we condemn. This is all vacuous rhetoric because in practice, nothing has been done, nothing will be done on the part of any government. Obviously, Iran and Yemen are the two that have historically, at least in the recent past, not been part of that larger community of Western, but even Middle Eastern governments, of saying one thing in favor of the Palestinians, in favor of ceasefire, but actually contributing to perpetuating the forever war policy of Israel. Qatar is a country that has converging economic interests with Israel, just like Saudi Arabia and most of the Muslim countries, which do condemn the genocide of Israel. By the way, just for the record, it is not just the international courts, the ICJ, the ICC, that have, in other words, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. as well as the United States, as well as, sorry, as well, not the United States, as well as the United Nations Special Rapporteur and other sub-agencies, the Special Rapporteur being Francesca Albanese, but even international organizations on human rights and even Israeli organizations, and the latest to conclude that what Israel is doing is genocide, is a group of world scholars. Most of them actually are Jewish, and they are experts on genocide, Holocaust studies, and so forth. And they concluded the same thing. There are Israeli organizations, human rights organizations. They concluded the same thing. So this is an almost universal. There's almost a universal agreement. The only ones who deviate are the Zionist state, obviously, the state of Israel, as well as corporate interests and in the West, led by the United States, and governments, again, led by the United States, which may go through the motions of saying, oh, we condemn, but actually they facilitate genocide, as the report of the United Nations Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese pointed out. There is collaboration, and there is vast collaboration, because Israel, left to its own devices, would not be able to do this, any of this, were it not for the fact that there has been economic, political, backstage political, and of course, military support by a number of countries around the world, mostly by the United States, but not just the United States alone. So this has to be put into that context. Now, the issue of, does Israel want peace? Does it want a ceasefire? Does it want to allow the Palestinian people to have a modicum of sovereignty, considering that this month, September 2025, there is to be a general assembly, United Nations General Assembly meeting to decide on what countries around the world, by the way, it's most of the countries around the world, want a Palestinian state, which sends a strong message to Israel. Obviously, the United States already replied to that by boycotting that meeting along with Israel. And just for the record, President Trump last night, that is, on the right um, after the IDF, after Israel struck Qatar and killed a number of Hamas leaders, by the way, the same ones there to negotiate some kind of a ceasefire. Trump said, "Well, we just found out too late." Now, just for the record, I want to point out that the CIA knows everything Israel does, almost everything. There is no possible way that Israel acted without, at the very least, the knowledge of the CIA. And the CIA informs the CIA. They're just soldiers, the servants of the embassy, and they must have informed the embassy and, of course, headquarters back in Langley, Virginia, and that went up the chain. So the U.S. was well aware that Israel would hit Qatar. This is not to the idea of obfuscating this issue. Oh, we knew nothing about it. Well, let's say they did know something about it. Would Trump stop Israel from hitting Qatar? That's the thing, that the way they carry this out gives them deniability, a plausible deniability in diplomacy, so that they can turn around and say to Qatar, which, by the way, is the strongest ally of the United States, "Oh, we didn't know anything about it. They did it on their own." Qatar knows full well that the United States knew in advance, at the very least, and more. I don't know. I don't have any classified information, but more than likely, They either told them, do whatever you're going to do, or tacitly approved, in other words. And the question is why? And the answer is partly, if you read between the lines of the United Nations Special Rapporteur Albanese's report, the answer rests in there. It's the convergence of interests, of corporate interests, especially Western companies, making a lot of money from what has been going on with Israel's forever war policy and destabilization policy, which also is part of U.S. policy in the Middle East, to make sure that these countries stay weak and that Israel remains at the forefront. This is an old Cold War strategy going way back, by the way, in 1948 when President Truman was in office. And the US has always used Israel in this respect. Of course, back then we had communism, and there was that pretext. Well, Israel is in the forefront against possible communist, or after Nasser in Egypt, the non aligned movement of the global south, third world, in other words. So this has been going on for a long time. Now, the other issue, and I'll conclude with this, and I invite all of you to look at the longer analytical video on this matter of Israel hitting Qatar, a sovereign nation, and presumably an ally, a strong ally of the United States, and also carrying out cordial relations with Israel, as do the rest of the Muslim countries, like I said, with the exception of a couple, Iran, Yemen. Turkey has cooled somewhat. Turkey has cooled somewhat some of the relationship that it has, but the rest of them are interested in all of this. Israel is really forging full ahead with its policy of ethnic cleansing, its policy of taking over Gaza, its policy of removing as many Palestinians as possible, a policy of imposing hegemony at the regional level with the shoulders, in other words, the backing of the United States and the West. I invite you to please take a look at the longer video, ask questions, write comments, and by all means, join this channel. Thank you very much. Thank you.